Shalom, and welcome to the 13th and final episode of the Great Tribulation, the third and fourth temples. I'm your host, Marshall Masters, publisher of Jesus and the Third Temple, and this 13-part series is made possible by Your Own World Books and features author Robert Ryland. And now we begin with the first part of Episode 13, the Third and Fourth Temples. I've seen discussions of the Third Temple for decades.
Yes.
What I'd like for you to do is start with the scenario for which the book is titled, Jesus and the Third Temple, and then take us through these other various scenarios, because this is the information people were not getting as they should.
The driver for having a third temple is, of course, the fact that when Antichrist emerges, he is going to permit Israel to resume the temple worship, including the animal sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to resume somewhere upon the emergence of Antichrist, somewhere in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to address one little thing first of all. A lot of people, especially Gentiles, don't understand what we are talking about when we say the temple. They're confused because they hear their Jewish friends say, "Oh, we're going to temple Saturday. I can't do that." Or a temple Israel, a temple David, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The synagogue has taken on the name of the temple because that's the closest relationship the Jewish people have since the temple was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make that one thing perfectly clear, that we are not talking about a synagogue where people sit in pews or in chairs. The temple is the house of God in Israel. And he dwelled in the little apartment in the back called the Holy of Holies.
So a synagogue is where people go to pray, like a church.
Yeah. He dwells in the Kodesh HaKodeshim, which is the Holy of Holies. But there are services there, but they're standing up. There aren't any seats or anything like that. They're all standing up in the courts on certain feast holidays, like particularly Yom Kippur.
Okay.
So I just wanted to get that straight before we get into this. Now, the third temple could be a tabernacle like they had during the Exodus, made from animal skins.
Mm-hmm.
And he could put it up anywhere in Israel that would have the right topography for doing red heifer sacrifice. It could be a temple of wood like they made when they came back from Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
They got the wood from Lebanon, built a wooden temple, and everybody cried because it didn't look anything as beautiful as Solomon's temple was.
Okay. On a tabernacle,
Mm-hmm.
and it's made from animal skins. Give the listener an idea of the physical dimensions of this thing and what it would look like from the outside and in the inside.
It would look like a tent, and it's about 75 feet long, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And about 25 feet wide. But the courts are somewhat larger than that. The Hachal is the building that would be equivalent to what the tabernacle was.
Mm-hmm.
The Hachal being the building of the temple in which resided God himself, and was comprised of the portico in front and the holy place inside, and the Kodesh HaKodeshim in the rear.
Mm-hmm.
And the menorah stood in there on the left side, and the table of showbread stood on the right side, and the altar of incense was up front.
Mm-hmm.
The veils separated the two chambers from each other. And the tabernacle was much like that.
Okay.
Not as fancy. They used crude materials, of course, in the Exodus and out there in the desert. But by the time we got to Herod, the temple was probably the most beautiful building on earth, and that's why Titus didn't want to destroy it. But I digress.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, as I say, a temple of wood received from Lebanon, as was built by Zerubbabel and Nehemiah. And again, anywhere in Israel, it doesn't have to be on the Temple Mount.
If you're saying within Israel, what is Israel in terms of the law? I mean, is it the 1948 borders, the 1968 borders, or is it something bigger?
It's the Israel you see now is what was the land that was given to the people when they came and the Lord gave them their land.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they're dwelling now.
Okay.
They didn't have the West Bank and so forth. That was all Israel. That's why there's such a problem over there right now. The Palestinians want to cut Israel in half.
Right. Cut it out.
The ocean,
Yeah, they want to push it in the ocean.
without any snorkels.
In other words, they could build it in the West Bank, and that would be legitimate, even though it's a held territory right now politically.
There are plenty of other places they could build it.
Okay.
If it were built before the abomination of desolation,
Mm-hmm.
it will, of course, be unacceptably unclean and defiantly unfit for use by Messiah, son of David, when he arrives.
Okay.
Antiochus IV sacrificed a pig on the altar of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
In the Bible, there are a lot of precedents, and that was a precedent of what the Antichrist is going to do. We know he's going to perform this abomination of desolation, but whether it will be the same or worse than Antiochus did is not in our knowledge right now. I kind of think it'll be worse.
Thanks for the good news.
Yeah, right. But he's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
It could be a temple of stone built adjacent to the Dome of the Rock.
Now, isn't that where Asher Kaufman wants to see it built?
Yes, he's one of those that would like to see it built there.
I just got to ask, though, is Asher Kaufman's position that it should be built there, is that consistent with other popular views that are held in Israel?
I don't know the whole numbers, as we would say, but he's not the only one that has proposed that.
Mm-hmm.
He is of that thought that, hey, we know that the Holy of Holies was at the threshing floor, which I have found, and let's build it where it's supposed to be. But there again, we have this other problem. The temple stones are cut by a secret process using no iron implements. In fact, if a stone is even touched by iron, it's useless for the temple.
Why is that?
That's the law.
That's the law.
Because iron is used to take lives. It's similar to the case of David. Why was David not permitted to build the temple? It fell to Solomon. And the Lord told him it was because you have too much blood on your hands,
Mm-hmm.
and I would rather have your son build it. And it's the same thing with iron. Iron is used to take men's lives, and the temple is to enrich men's lives, and it's not appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how they do it, don't ask me. It's a well-kept secret. By the way, so is the secret of the Babylonian curtain that hangs over the door we talked about earlier, is braided by damsels. They won't let anybody see what that looks like.
Right.
Kaufman, of course, located the Holy of Holies, the threshing floor that was purchased from Araunah the Jebusite by King David.
Mm-hmm.
When you see that stone, if you know anything about threshing floors, it's obvious that that is a threshing floor. When I first saw it, I didn't know anything about that stuff. I walked by there, and there's a little cupola over it, and there's a stone down there. It's kind of smooth, and I wonder what that is. Oh, well, there's no plaque or anything there. And I walked on and did the rest of my tour. And and you must be very careful not to have a Bible open up on the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
The Waqf will get all over your case.
Oh, yeah.
Even writing down things and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like that.
No, I remember when I was up on the Temple Mount, it just seemed so intolerant.
Yeah.
I mean, they just get so fanatical up there, and You couldn't go up there and take a Bible or take a Torah or...
They're not nice about it at all.
They're not at all. They're very, very mean about it. And it's like, I always found that odd because they know they've built their shrine on top of somebody else's shrine and they just have no respect.
They think they have. But I believe that I have proved in the book that they have not.
Ah.
It is not on the temple site. It couldn't. The temple site could not possibly have been there. And the contour lines of the Mount of Olives tell the whole story. I won't go any farther than that right now.
Okay.
But that's where it is.
What other options have we got?
Okay. I'm kind of skeptical that they've cut the stones for the temple because of this secret process. I don't know if the people that are around up there now have access to that secret method or not. But anyway, the next possibility would be, and the rabbis believe this, and I kind of go along with them.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you why. It could be built in an instant by a word, by Messiah when he arrives. The Dome of the Rock and all the other buildings are going to be rubble at that point. According to prophecy, just before he arrives, the topography of the whole area is going to be revised immensely. In fact, there's a huge aquifer under the Temple Mount, and it's going to connect the Mediterranean with the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is not going to just be wet, it's going to be seawater. And the little town of En-Gedi there is going to become a prosperous fishing village. It could be built just like the snap of a finger.
I've been in En-Gedi. I mean, if you have all that water coming into the Dead Sea, En-Gedi's going to be under a lot of water.
Well, it's 1,400 feet below sea level now.
Right.
But with this huge earthquake that's going to occur, and this is right on the rift that comes down from Africa. It goes right through the Mount of Olives. En-Gedi could be lifted up 1,400 and then some feet.
Wow. If that's the case, En-Gedi would be rubble as well.
Right. Everything's going to be rubble.
Everything's going to be rubble.
There's not going to be a wall standing. And at that same time, 100-pound hailstones are going to be coming from the sky, and men are going to be cursing God, and it's going to be a horrible day. Not a good day. But it's moving to me when I look at the Haggadah for the Seder. At least must be 12 times in there. The rabbis say that may Messiah, son of David, come speedily in our day. And those same words are uttered at the men's Shabbat services on Saturday mornings in synagogues all over the world as a part of the service. That same prayer is uttered. They figure that, hey, God is going to answer our prayer, and we've been praying for a long time, and he didn't do it suddenly or quickly or soon in our frame of reference. We've been praying this for a couple of thousand years, so we know he's going to answer prayer, so he will probably do it speedily, like as in the twinkling of an eye.
Wow.
That's their reasoning. He's going to arrive on the 10th of Tishri, and the 15th of Tishri is the Feast of Tabernacles, and he will want the temple in order for that, so he can invite emissaries from all nations all over the world that have survived, that is, to start his kingdom. There's a 1,000-year kingdom ruling from Jerusalem. And so it figures to me he's not going to want to wait 2 or 3 years for him to rebuild the temple with some stones they cut down from underneath and put them together. He's going to want it like right now.
That's it. Just add water.
Yeah.
We've got to the point where we have covered all the details.
There's a verse in the Bible that kind of corroborates this.
Okay.
Amos 9:11.
All right.
In that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof. And I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old. That kind of sounds like what we've been talking about.
It sure does. So the bottom line for folks out there, is that it's not necessarily going to happen the way most people think.
Right.
There's a lot of different options, and so you have to keep an open mind. And the whole advantage of your book is that people are going to understand all those options, which brings me to where I think we need to talk to our listeners and give them our own individual postscripts on this series, because it's been an ambitious undertaking. When we come back, I'd like for you to just talk to the listeners, human to human,
Man to man.
man to man, and man to woman.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, let's not forget, God has a feminine voice.
Yes.
To learn more about Jesus and the Third Temple by Robert Ryland, please visit JesusandTheThirdTemple.com. And now we continue with the second part of Episode 13, The Third and Fourth Temples. Well, Bob, I think we've gotten to the point in the series where we've talked about history, we've talked about the future, but now we need to talk about the good folks out there that have been listening to this series, because we are facing a tribulation, and we want them to do as best as possible in that process. And so with that, what are your thoughts?
I have compassion for all these people because they apparently share the same kind of experience that I've been enduring. When you talk to people who resist this sort of thing, anything that they haven't heard in church or didn't learn in the seminary, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear anything they never heard before. I was bemoaning and whining about this fact to my friend Vendell Jones, whom covered the ashes of the red heifer. And he said, Bob, you should wear it as a badge of honor. And that's what I would pass on to our listeners. Don't be discouraged by this negative eye rolling and walking away and changing the subject. Just you wear it as a badge of honor. God wants you to know these things, or he wouldn't have sent you here. You're going to come closer to Jesus as a Christian outcast. I mean, after all, he was an outcast.
Yeah.
He brought a new kind of Judaism in. Hey, wait a minute, we've always done it this way. And he was severely reprimanded, you could say, for that.
Could you, in a manner of speaking, say that those who have felt this rejection, this scorn, that in a sense, they can relate more to Yeshua than anyone else, because he was challenging the status quo.
The word is scorn. You said it. That's what you get. I'm sorry to say, but you will develop calluses, and with God's grace, you'll develop a resistance to that. And also, there are times when God might not want you to spiel out with this sort of thing. You have to let the Holy Spirit guide you. In fact, you should always, if you're going to go to a gathering or anything like that, or frequently during the day, ask the Holy Spirit to guide you into when and where, with whom that you should share these things or not.
As you were writing this book, did you feel that connection continuously, or did it come at some point in the process?
Many times, I'll break up telling this.
It's okay.
Many times, as I was writing this book, the screen clouded up with tears, and it was the Holy Spirit telling me that I hit a home run.
You could feel that.
Oh, boy, could I feel it.
You get a sense of that. You can feel them hanging over your shoulder.
Folks out there, you're going to experience the same thing. When you hit a home run, he's going to tell you. He might not always tell you, but sometimes you're going to get a wallop. Boy, oh boy, that was a good one.
Ah.
And the other thing is, you may not lead someone to Messiah. You may not see them get down on their knees and confess and so forth and accept him. Like they do, they walk down the aisle at church and they go up to the altar and at the rail, etc., etc. It may not happen for 50 years after you tell that person. What you said will ring in their ears, maybe that many years later. and then you get your home run, but you won't see it. Sorry about that. That's why you have to swing the bat whenever he tells you to.
Reminds me of when I was in the Army and that great line, "You in the green,
Yeah.
step forward." You know,
Yeah, that's a good one.
that's it.
You in the green suit.
You in the green suit, just step forward. So, in essence, then, what you're saying with this is that nobody is ordained, selected, credentialed, certified, or assigned to possess and share this information on a need to know basis with others. That's not the way it works. It's a universal library, it's for all of us. And all it takes is a little confidence in yourself to get a library card.
You hit a homer there. You have to have a little confidence in yourself that you are able to deliver this. And the best way to do that is to know the scriptures. There is nothing like a knowledge of the scriptures. You don't have to memorize the Bible like Jack Van Impe, but people who talk to you, and if you spiel out with something that's out of Ezekiel or from the book of Acts, you speak with authority because you know it.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievers and doctrinal thinkers, that gets them right between the eyes.
So, in essence, by doing this, you wind up getting the knowledge that you can stand on your own very, very well.
Yes.
With people who are credentialed, assigned, diplomaed, and all of that. You can go toe-to-toe with them.
One thing you're going to run into, though,
Mm-hmm.
one of the first things you're going to run into, and Marshall, I have discussed this at length.
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about that Jew stuff for?
That's going to come.
Well, 66 books of the Bible were written by Jews. Guess what? But the anti-Semitism is still strong out there. Maybe we're not going to have Kristallnacht tomorrow, but it's alive and well. Trust me. And you're going to run into it when you start expounding on some of these things that we've taught you in this series, or especially if you read my book. I always tell people it's a very Jewish book and it's a very Christian book. Well, Christians are grafted Jews. Christianity is a Jewish sect, if you will.
And there's many sects of Judaism. You have ultra-Orthodox, Orthodox, conservative, Reformed.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone else calls the Reformed Jews Unitarian with the Torah.
I like that.
I guess what? Is it for Christians, you're the Meshuggah sect?
Yeah. But we know a number of Unitarian Universalists here where we live. They believe in works.
Mm-hmm.
They believe that if you do kind things to people and do a lot of good things for the world and so forth, that you will go to heaven or so forth, or wherever it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally wrong according to Christian teaching, but it's useless to try to argue with them about it unless you can get maybe one-on-one with a person who is willing to listen. When you're in a group is when it's really difficult. You people will find that out. When you're in a group, there will always be one naysayer or ridiculer, an accuser. And that dilutes and distracts from the message to the others, but you just have to live with it. It happens.
How do you stand alone in your knowing without getting your head thrashed? Because that's really the way it goes. But you were pointing out that your book is a very Christian book and it's a very Jewish book, and I agree with that completely. But Jews have separate heritage issues and Christians have separate heritage issues,
Mm-hmm.
but that there are those issues of heritage which both share equally and which they can find common ground. So how would you define that shared heritage and the other two?
The more I study Judaica, especially Babylonian Talmud and Midrash and the Chumash, serious rabbinical works like that, I find that the Orthodox Jewish teaching is very close to the fundamental evangelical Christian teaching.
Mm-hmm.
It really boils down to just about one argument. Who is that going to be that's going to stand on the summit of the Mount of Olives on that day?
Mm-hmm.
That's just about it. The teaching, the way you should treat people and the way you should feel toward God, etc., is very similar. Well, how could it help but be? The apostles and the disciples were all what? Jewish.
Yeah.
And who did we learn from? Them.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's a prophecy back in the book of Genesis.
Uh-huh.
Noah got drunk after he made a wine vineyard.
As they say, he got a little sugared.
Well, whatever part of the country you come from.
Okay.
The blanket fell off of him, and he was laying there all natural.
Uh-huh.
And the youngest son, Ham, came by, and he laughed. Oh, look at the old man. Big to-do about it, you know. The next morning, Noah came out of his hangover, and God gave him a vision of what would be the heritage of his three sons. Shem being the eldest, Japheth being the second son,
Mm-hmm.
and Ham being the youngest. And he said that Japheth will I increase, and that's the people from Europe. We Europeans are the industrial nations of the world. We have been increased, except we didn't get the oil yet, anyway. And Japheth will dwell in the tents of Shem. And he said that Shem will teach the nations about God. Well, in those days, you didn't go to Eisenhower Elementary down the street. If your father was wealthy, he sent you to a scholar and he paid him for your room and board, and you dwelled in the tent of the scholar and you learned to read and write.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't have so much money, he would indenture you to him. You would earn your keep, and he would teach you.
Mm-hmm.
But you would dwell in the tent of the scholar. And so we, European Japheth descendants, have dwelled in the tent of Shem and have learned our Christianity, a.k.a. new kind of Judaism, from the sons of Shem. What do you know? Second most marvelous prophecy in the Bible.
There's a lot that we see similar here, but there's things we see differently, and it'll be interesting for the listeners to contrast the two views.
Mm-hmm.
Why we believe that the folks who are interested in this audio series are amongst the most precious alive today.
Well, God has something to say about this in Acts 2:17, and I believe that he was talking about these people. He says, and it shall come to pass in the last days, and we know that's where we are, saith God, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. That means teach. And so here we are. We're teaching these people to teach the truth that has been swept under the carpet for all these centuries.
That's right.
And so they are precious, because they've been chosen to do this.
The upshot is they just get it.
Right.
Okay. Well, Bob, this has been a heck of a segment, and I'm up to bat in the next one.
Okay, swell.
To learn more about Jesus and the Third Temple by Robert Ryland, please visit JesusandTheThirdTemple.com. And now we continue with the third and final part of Episode 13, The Third and Fourth Temples. In closing out this interview series, I'd like to talk about inspiration. Bob's inspiration, and more importantly, your inspiration. Let's begin with Bob. Bob reminds me of all the little puzzles life gives us. You know, there's that old expression, life is that funny little thing that gets in the way of all your plans. And so we get these puzzles and we have to sort them out. We have a puzzle at work. We have a puzzle in our relationships. We have puzzles in our careers. We have puzzles, well, just most everywhere. And what do you do with puzzles? You dump all the pieces out on the table and you start looking for a corner. Because a corner is, well, intellectually speaking, a single point of truth, a spot. It's that one thing that, well, everything else connects to. And so we see these issues in our lives, these puzzles, and the first thing we do is we look for that spot, that corner piece, and then we work our way in. But sometimes we get a really, really big puzzle. It's like we're just walking along down the street, la 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 la, enjoying life, and then all of a sudden, there's this big hand of God comes and swoops us up and puts us into this huge, dark, cavernous room with one light in the ceiling shining down on this massive, huge table. And on it is a picture puzzle that is so humongous, it literally strains the edges of our peripheral vision. Well, I think that's what happened with Bob. There he was, hand of God. He's standing there looking at this big, massive puzzle. And just as he got it into his mind, what that finished puzzle looks like, hand of God swept it up off the table, put it into the box, put the lid back on, handed it to Bob, and God said, "Go sort it out on your own." And so when you're reading Jesus and the Third Temple by Robert Ryland, what you're really doing is what Robert had to do in reverse. He had this hand of God puzzle moment, knew he was going to spend decades of his life sorting it out, and he did. And so all you have to do is read his book, and all the puzzle work is done for you. All those decades of research are done for you. And here's the really good part. There's no question in your mind about what you're reading and the source. You know that Bob is an evangelical Zionist. He makes no bones about that. This is not something where you have an academic concerned about getting grants funded. Likewise, a theologian who knows exactly where doctrine and the truth meet at cross purposes, and will be very careful to avoid that place. And then there are those that just simply do what they do for hate's sake. And that's all. With Bob, it's very simple. If you understand that he is an evangelical Zionist, what you have is a book, a very substantial book, that is about the truth he found. That was all. He just went looking for truth, and he found it, and he shared it, because this is the responsibility of knowledge. And that's what I really admire about Bob. He had his hand of God picture puzzle moment, and what did he do? He took responsibility for that knowledge. He stood up, and he wrote a book that is for you, written with love from his heart to yours. Which brings us now to your inspiration. You, the listener, the reader. What inspires you? Well, that's between you and God. But what I can do is I can tell you that when you read this book, you are going to take a fantastic journey. Your inspiration, hand of God picture puzzle moment, if you will. You just got to read the book. So what's that experience like? How do you find your inspiration along the way? Well, let's begin with imagining this book for what it really is. It's a magic tour bus. And there's going to be Bob up there by the driver, microphone in hand. And as the bus is traveling along, he's going to be pointing out things. Now, look out to the left. Isn't that interesting? Oh my gosh, that really is. And look out to the right. Oh, I've got a wonderful story about that. And sure enough, he'll have a wonderful story because he's that kind of gregarious guy that you just enjoy listening to. But here's something about the magic bus that is amazing. It's also a time machine. Not only can Bob sit there and tell the driver, take a left here and take a left there, he can also tell the driver, take a left here and go back a few thousand years. And next thing you know, there you are. And the bus stops where? At the tabernacle in the desert of Sinai. That's where the tour begins. And as you get on and off the bus, and Bob is constantly talking about, well, look over here and look over there, and here's the meaning of this, and here's the meaning of that. You're just seeing one thing after another that amazes you, and maybe in all of that, you will see something that connects the dots for you personally with something else you've seen in your life or thought about in your life. And here, like the corner piece of a puzzle, you find that spot, that single point of truth, and you go, now I can start connecting picture puzzle pieces myself. And oh my, that is a profound, life-changing moment. Yeah, you might have to follow the beat of a different drummer. You might be ostracized because you were looking for the truth. But the rewards that you get will far outweigh the harassment and abuse. Because this process will bring you closer to your God, however you view your God to be, because that is how you find God. Not knowledge and wisdom that's packaged and wrapped for you. No, none of these artificial constructions by other people who have a vested economic interest in those designs. It's just about you, your God, and the pursuit of truth. So in closing, I'd like to repeat a little prayer that my mother had us say every night before dinner, and here it goes. It has been told thee all men what is good and what the Lord doth require of thee, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. Robert Ryland walks humbly with his God, and he shares what he has shared with you because he loves God and because he loves you. There are no other agendas, no other reasons, no other motivations. Just love. And if there's only one word you want to define Yeshua with, there it is. So if you're ready to get on that magic tour bus and to learn things you could have never imagined possible, welcome aboard. Find a seat, have fun, and of course, as with all tours, a lot more fun when you bring someone along. So get 2 copies of the book, one for you and someone you love. For Robert Ryland and myself, Shalom. This concludes the Great Tribulation. Robert and I sincerely thank you for listening. And if you've enjoyed this series, please share it with others. To learn more about Robert's book, Jesus in the Third Temple, The Complete Guide to the Ancient History and Secret Rituals of the Red Heifer Ceremony, please visit yowbooks.com, YOWBOOKS.com, or JesusandTheThirdTemple.com.